Welcome to Headline Wednesday from Dispatch U.S. Military History Magazine, developed by trackpads.com.
Each week, we take one pivotal moment from United States military history and follow it from the first warning signs to the final outcome.
Today, we go to the Netherlands in the Second World War for the story of Operation Market Garden. A longer version of this story, with fact sheets and photos, is available in the print edition, either on LinkedIn or by email.
The morning sky over the Netherlands is thick with engines as transport aircraft drone across the flat Dutch landscape. Inside the cramped fuselages, paratroopers from the 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions of the United States, along with British and Polish airborne troops in other serials, check each other's gear and wait for commands they have practiced again and again. Below them lie fields, canals, red-tiled roofs, and towns whose bridges may decide whether the war in Europe can be shortened by months. When the jump lights turn green, the doors fill with figures in helmets and heavy packs. Men step into the slipstream, parachutes snap open, and the sky above Eindhoven, Nijmegen, and the surrounding countryside fills with drifting canopies and equipment bundles. Dutch civilians stare upward in shock and hope. From the air, paratroopers glimpse church spires, scattered smoke, rail embankments, and river lines they have studied on maps. Those map lines are now real ground. Once boots hit the earth, the neat order of flight plans becomes the confusion of a combat drop. Small groups gather scattered sticks, search for equipment, dodge sporadic German fire, and begin moving through ditches, fences, and narrow lanes. Their immediate task is clear: seize roads and bridges before German engineers can blow them, then hold until the armored column arrives from the south. The larger future of the operation feels distant. The first problem is simply to rebuild order on the ground. Somewhere to the north, beyond most American paratroopers' view, British airborne troops are fighting for a single great bridge at Arnhem. The crossings from the Belgian border through Eindhoven and Nijmegen to Arnhem form one fragile artery. If every link holds, British armor can race north and cross the Rhine. If any key span is lost or held too long by German defenders, the chain can break and leave airborne units isolated deep behind enemy lines. Market Garden grows out of the Allied surge after Normandy. In late summer 1944, Allied armies break out across France, liberate Paris, and drive German forces back toward their own borders. The mood in many headquarters is confident, but the advance is straining its own lifeline. Fuel trucks race to keep up, supply depots leap forward, ports remain limited, and commanders worry that the armies may outrun the logistics that make movement possible. Two visions compete for how to finish the war in the West. General Dwight Eisenhower favors a broad front advance that keeps pressure on the German line everywhere. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery argues for a concentrated thrust in the north, aimed toward the Ruhr, Germany's industrial heartland. Airborne divisions, newly blooded in Normandy, seem to offer a way to leap over rivers and canals that would slow tanks. The chance to strike decisively before winter is hard to resist. The market part of the plan is the largest airborne operation yet attempted. American, British, and Polish paratroopers and glider troops will drop along a northbound axis through the Netherlands. The garden part is the ground assault by British 30 Corps, which will push up a single main highway from the Belgian border along the route the airborne troops have opened. If the plan works, the Allies cross the Maas, the Waal, and the Lower Rhine, turn the German northern flank, and open a path toward the Ruhr. The stakes are enormous. Success might outflank the Siegfried Line, relieve pressure on other Allied armies, and shorten the war in Europe. For Dutch civilians under occupation, It offers hope of liberation before another winter of hunger and reprisals. For the airborne troops, it means isolation far ahead of friendly lines, with only their rifles, limited heavy weapons, glider-borne support, and the promise that tanks and artillery will arrive in time.
The risks are written into the terrain. The corridor runs through low, wet country, broken by dikes, canals, rivers, and only a few usable roads. A single highway must carry infantry, armor, artillery, fuel, ammunition, engineers, and medical traffic in a long, vulnerable column. A blown bridge, a wrecked vehicle, or a contested village can halt everything. The narrow road holds the possibility of a fast victory, but also the possibility that the Allies are reaching one bridge too far.
Intelligence reports feed both confidence and warning. Many German units appear under strength and shaken by retreat, but there are signs that armored formations, including SS Panzer units, are regrouping in the Netherlands. Those warnings are not entirely ignored, but they are discounted in the rush to turn opportunity into victory. Air planners struggle with aircraft availability, range, weather, and the need to fly multiple lifts. Ground commanders worry about pushing one corps through constricted terrain.
The air plan also adds risk. There are not enough aircraft to drop every airborne unit, gun, vehicle, and supply bundle in one lift. Some reinforcements and equipment will have to arrive later, which means the first troops on the ground must seize objectives quickly and then hold with limited support. Drop zones are chosen partly for safety and practicality, not simply for distance to the bridges. That choice gives some units room to land, but it also leaves them with miles to march before they reach the places they have to hold.
Communications are another fragile piece of the design. Radios that work on training fields may fail in wooded terrain, urban streets, or among scattered airborne columns. Once the drops begin, commanders will have to make decisions with incomplete information, while German units react faster than expected. Market Garden is bold because it tries to join air mobility and armored speed into one continuous movement. It is dangerous because every part of that movement depends on the others arriving on time.
The final plan reflects both compromise and conviction. The 101st Airborne will secure the southern bridges around Eindhoven and nearby waterways. The 82nd Airborne will hold the Groesbeek Heights and take the crossings around Nijmegen, including the vital wall bridges. British 1st Airborne, later supported by Polish paratroopers, will land near Arnhem to seize the lower Rhine bridge. British 30 Corps will then link the pockets together. On paper, if each link holds, the road to Germany opens. In practice, the chain leaves little room for error.
When the operation begins on September 17, 1944, the first movements seem to match Allied hopes. The 101st Airborne drops near Eindhoven, Sonn, Veghel, and other points that guard the highway. Paratroopers rush toward bridges over the Wilhelmina Canal and smaller waterways, cutting wires and clearing roadblocks as they go. At Sonn, they are only minutes too late. The bridge explodes in smoke and broken steel, forcing engineers to build a replacement before armor can continue north. Farther up the corridor, the 82nd Airborne lands around Nijmegen and the Groesbeek Heights. The high ground matters because it overlooks the route and can block German counterattacks against the corridor. The bridges over the Maas and the Waal matter because without them, the drive cannot reach Arnhem. In Nijmegen itself, German defenders stiffen around the great road and rail bridges, turning approaches into strong points. Though American paratroopers have arrived, but seizing those crossings will prove harder than planners expected. At the northern end, British 1st Airborne lands west of Arnhem, several miles from its main objective. Gliders bring jeeps, light artillery, and specialist units, but the landing zones are farther from the bridge than many officers would prefer. Radios fail or struggle with interference, leaving units with only a partial sense of the battlefield. Even so, Lieutenant Colonel John Frost leads a force into Arnhem and reaches the northern end of the bridge. His men dig into nearby buildings and prepare to hold as long as they can.
Between those airborne lodgements, British 30 Corps crosses the start line and begins the Garden advance. Tanks and infantry roll up the narrow highway that Dutch civilians will remember as Hell's Highway. Cheering crowds line parts of the route, but wet fields and deep ditches leave little room to maneuver. A single knocked-out vehicle can slow hundreds behind it. German units recover faster than expected and begin local counterattacks against the column and the airborne troops holding its flanks. As hours turn into days, the timeline frays. At Saun, British engineers work under threat of fire to throw a Bailey bridge across the canal where the original span is gone. Every hour spent waiting for steel and timber to lock into place is an hour the men at Arnhem do not have. Around Nijmegen, American paratroopers and British armor fight through city streets, embankments, factories, and river approaches. The corridor is open in some places and under attack in others.
Arnhem becomes more desperate. Frost's men around the bridge fight from houses and cellars while German tanks and self-propelled guns pound the buildings. Ammunition runs low, medical supplies dwindle, and communication with the rest of the division is uncertain. Other British units try to break through from the west, but they run into strong German counterattacks across ditches, hedgerows, and suburban streets, without enough heavy support to push through quickly.
Meanwhile, German forces repeatedly cut or threaten Hell's Highway. Each counterattack forces Allied units to divert from the push north and reopen the route. South of Nijmegen, tanks and supply columns still have to secure every mile, even as the clock runs down at Arnhem. North of Nijmegen, the final stretch becomes a race between British armor grinding toward the Rhine and German units reinforcing the approaches.
The defining test at Nijmegen comes on the Waal. American paratroopers are ordered to cross the wide, fast river in light assault boats and attack the northern ends of the bridges while British armor presses from the south. Men paddle through strong current and enemy fire with almost no cover. Boats splinter or sink, and survivors haul themselves over dikes and through fields to knock out German positions. At the same time, tanks and infantry fight into Nijmegen to reach the bridge ramps. That crossing captures the operation's entire character in one scene. The objective is clear, the need is urgent, and the men ordered forward know that delay at the river may doom the troops fighting at Arnhem. Yet the tools are thin, the river is wide, and German fire is waiting. Success comes from courage and improvisation, but it also arrives late enough that the larger plan remains in danger.
When the Nijmegen road bridge finally falls to the Allies, it feels like a breakthrough that might still save the plan. British armor roars across, sometimes moving into the night with headlights burning. But the lost hours at Saun, the hard fighting around the Waal, and the repeated need to secure Hell's Highway mean the column is smaller and later than intended. The drive toward Arnhem resumes with urgency, but the window is closing.
At Arnhem, the men at the bridge are near the limits of endurance. They fight room to room as buildings collapse under fire. Wounded men crowd makeshift aid posts. Street corners change hands. Every distant rumble might be friendly tanks or another German vehicle. Without relief, the position can only erode. Eventually, the force around the bridge is overwhelmed, its survivors killed, wounded, or captured after days of resistance.
South of the town, other airborne units hold a shrinking perimeter on the north bank of the Rhine. They are cut off from the main Allied armies by miles of contested ground and a corridor that cannot be pushed farther in time. The Allies have taken many objectives and control important towns and bridges up to Nijmegen, but Arnhem remains in German hands. The turning point lies in the gap between hard-won success at the wall and failure to secure the final bridge. Market Garden ends with a night withdrawal across the Rhine, rather than a triumphant crossing. Under darkness and rain, British airborne survivors are ferried south in small boats, leaving behind dead, wounded, and prisoners in and around Arnhem. The corridor south of Nijmegen remains in Allied hands, but the central purpose of the operation has failed. The Allies have not forced a permanent Rhine crossing or opened the way into Germany's industrial heartland.
The consequences are significant. The Allies must confront German frontier defenses over the following months in grinding operations along a broader front, including the Hurtgen Forest and the later German counteroffensive in the Ardennes. For the Dutch, the cost is especially painful. Large parts of the country remain under occupation through the winter of 1944 and 1945, when German retaliation, economic disruption, and blocked food supplies bring severe hunger and suffering.
Within airborne and armored communities, Market Garden becomes a study in both courage and limits. The bravery of paratroopers who seized and held bridges, engineers who built under fire, and tank crews who fought up Hell's Highway is not in doubt. The questions fall on assumptions and planning, landing zones far from objectives, underestimated German strength, fragile communications, and dependence on one vulnerable road through difficult terrain.
For students of military history, Market Garden offers inspiration and caution together. It shows what airborne and armored forces can attempt when leaders are willing to move fast, and how small units can hold key ground against heavy odds. It also shows how geography, timing, logistics, and enemy resilience can turn a bold plan into a costly near miss. Courage can hold a bridge, but it cannot erase distance, weather, blocked roads, or a recovering enemy.